A series of incredibly bloody conflicts swept through Western Europe between 1500 and 1650. These conflicts were the result of the overlapping, conflicting jurisdictions, which had been a characteristic feature of the Middle Ages and which had become untenable in the modern world. During the Middle Ages, kings and noblemen lived in a state of constant competition over claims to decision-making powers. Ecclesiastical and worldly rulers incessantly disputed who was to have the final say in any given situation. Cities and provinces competed with one another. The nobility and the clergy were not subject to the same rules as ordinary people. The political structure, in short, was overlapping and many-layered. No single institution had the last word for a single piece of land. And from Jean Baudin in France to Johannes Althusius in Germany, from Grotius in the Netherlands to Thomas Hobbes in England, thinkers in every European country came to the same conclusion: to put a stop to these endless wars that had swept through Europe for over a century and a half, and that was to establish centralized territorial jurisdiction. This marked the very transition from the Middle Ages to the modern age. One single organization was ultimately to be invested with the authority to maintain order over a clearly defined territory. And the population would in turn be asked to pledge obedience to that single power. The age of the nation state had begun. Peace was remarkably restored in Europe over the course of the 17th and 18th centuries. The continent flourished, and both the Enlightenment and several democratic revolutions ensued. Wars became more rational and more limited in scope, with the exception of the wars that grew out of renewed ambitions to establish imperial rule, as happened under Napoleon, the German Kaiser, Mussolini, and Hitler. Despite its remarkable successes, an insidious process of dismantlement overtook the nation-states of Europe after the Second World War. The agents of its destruction being supranational institutions, such as the European Union, the European Court of Human Rights, the World Trade Organization, the International Court of Justice, as well as the systematic delusion of homogeneous populations through mass immigration, open borders, and multiculturalism. The result constitutes a kind of return that we're witnessing today to the Middle Ages. New overlapping jurisdictions are being created and cultivated in the form of Sharia law, in the form of international law applying directly to citizens in all of our countries. A new class-based society has even come into being, with a new quasi-hereditary aristocracy in the form of our cosmopolitan elites, who think of themselves as being highly educated, who intermarry and operate on an international scale, and even look down on the ordinary citizens whom they condemn as deplorables. Quasi-imperial decrees have also returned in the form of the rules and regulations from Brussels. A secular form of papal authority has even returned via the Universal Human Rights Court and the Universal International Criminal Court. For let us not forget, universal, it's the literal translation of the Greek word Catholic or Catholicos. Yet this new order cannot be reconciled with democracy and the rule of law. For democracy requires a sovereign parliament that decides on war and peace, expenditure, immigration, and so on. And the great capitals of our European countries have in fact already lost virtually all of their decision-making powers in crucial areas of policy. They cannot decide things anymore that go against the international treaties, against the European Court, against the European Union, and so on. So we've reached a decisive moment in our history. We're facing a fundamental choice. Are we going to continue along this path of supranationalism and multiculturalism, which inevitably leads to a new kind of Middle Ages? Or are we going to return to the nation state?